My name is Felix Onyinlola. I want to welcome you to the week three of our psychological testing class. I hope you've enjoyed the first and the second week. Of course, there's no way you can capture all the informations we have in the first lecture and second lecture at one sitting, and there's a need for you to listen to them over and over again for you to be able to absorb all the informations we have in there. Okay, so this is week three. We are gradually moving in there to explore more important topics under psychological testing for pastoral counseling class. So our focus for this week has to do with ethical and legal issues in psychological testing. Ethical and legal issues in psychological testing. What this is saying is that there is a legal part or ethical part in psychological testing. So, our focus is to look into ethical responsibility, legal accountability, and of course, our pastoral wisdom in psychological testing. Let me start by saying this: psychological testing is not a neutral activity. It's never a neutral activity. Every test administered carries ethical, legal, and cultural and pastoral implications. Every test, every assessment we carried out has ethical, legal, cultural, and pastoral implications. In clinical and pastoral contexts, assessment has the power to help or harm people. It has capacity to clarify or mislead. It can liberate or stigmatize. Let me say this to you again. In clinical context, in pastoral context, when we carry out assessment, it has power to help people. You can be helpful. And it has power to harm people. It has power to clarify or mislead people. It can also liberate or stigmatize. So, therefore, competence in testing must be matched with ethical discernment and legal awareness. So, when we are measuring your competency in psychological testing, we cannot separate it from ethical discernment and legal awareness. So, this lecture examines the ethical foundations and legal safeguards that govern psychological testing with a particular attention to the following. Number one, informed context, informed consent. Two, confidentiality. Three, misuse of tests. Four, and the integration of professional and pastoral ethical guidelines. Please take note of this because we are going to be talking about them one after the other. So, at the end of this week two, you must be able to explain the ethical principles governing psychological testing and assessment. Number two, you must be able to define what informed consent and confidentiality within testing context. Number three, you must be able to identify common forms of test misuse and their consequences. Number four, you must be able to describe relevant legal considerations in assessment practice. And number five, you must be able to integrate professional psychological ethics with pastoral and ministerial responsibilities because I'm aware that some of us are ministers. That's why we are laying emphasis on pastoral and ministerial responsibility. Okay, let's start with ethical foundations of psychological testing. ethical foundations of psychological testing. When we talk about ethical foundations, I want us to understand that ethical practice in testing is rooted in the principle that persons are not objects of measurement, but bearers of dignity. Once you separate dignity of humanity from whatever you are doing, that's an abuse. Okay, so whatever you are doing, remember that you are dealing with people, and that's the problem many people run into. For those of us who have read the history of psychology, you will get to know what happened many, many, many years ago. I don't want to make so much reference to that. When people were tested without their consent, when many things were done to humanity without their consent, even when we don't even know what you are doing, taking advantage of people, even to do whatever we want to do. So whatever you are doing in helping profession, in pastoral ministry, whatever aspect you find yourself, don't forget you are not dealing with an object. You are dealing with human being, and dignity of humanity must be upheld. Therefore, tests must serve the best interest of the client. You don't just carry out tests to satisfy your curiosity or to satisfy to make a point. It must be done based on the interests of the client, not the convenience of the practitioner or institution. Okay, please don't forget that is the ethical foundation of psychological testing. You are dealing with human being. It requires dignity. Everything you are doing must be to the interest of the client, not to your advantage or advantage of any organization. So that's very key. What are the key ethical principles? Key ethical principles that we must uphold. We must note that, and we must put into consideration whatever we are doing. This is not limited to your work alone, it's limited to every professional dealing with humanity. We must uphold these ethical principles. Number one, respect for persons. Respect for persons. Every human being deserves respect. And don't forget autonomy and dignity of humanity. In whatever you are doing, when you are testing people, when you are using your tools, your kit to carry out a measurement of whatever you are doing, respect for person, autonomy, and dignity. That's number one ethical principle. Number two, beneficence and non-maleficence. That is, whatever you are doing, no harm to people. Do good to people, avoid harm. Whatever we are doing, we must avoid harm and do good to people. Okay, number three is justice. When we're talking about justice, we are talking about fairness and non discrimination. Fairness in all we do and non discrimination. Number four ethical principle is integrity and responsibility. Integrity and responsibility. According to one of our textbook we are using for this class, COIN, Psychological Testing and Assessment, the writer posited that ethical assessment requires that practitioners understand not only how tests work, but when, why, and for whom they should be used. Let me say that again. Cohen et al. Posited that ethical assessment requires that the practitioners understand not only how tests work, but when, why, and for whom they should be used. That is the foundation of psychological testing. Let's move forward to informed consent in psychological testing. Informed consent. When we talk about informed consent, what do we mean by that? Informed consent is the process by which a client voluntarily agrees to assessment after receiving adequate information about the nature, the purpose, the risks, and limits of testing. I want to take that again. Informed consent is the process by which a client voluntarily, voluntarily agrees to assessment after receiving adequate information about the nature, the purpose, the risk, and limits of testing. Which means before you carry out any assessment or diagnosis on any client, informed consent form must be given to people to read and understand and signed. And sign, you make sure they sign it before you do anything. In fact, before you begin to administer your test, you need to read it one by one, line by line, to your client and ask them whether they understand the content. You're not just giving it to them to read and sign. You are making sure they understand what they are reading, and not only understanding it, they agree to it and signing it. This is called informed consent form. There is no organization that deals with people who do not have this thing I'm talking about. So this is very important. What are the essential components of informed consent? What are the you know important components of informed consent? Before administering any test, the assessor, which is the practitioner, must explain one, the purpose of the assessment. Why are we doing what we are doing? Number two, the type of test being used. You're not just telling them the purpose, you are telling them for this test, this is what we're going to be using. Number three, how results will be used and shared. It is the right of your client to know how the result of their test will be used and shared. Number four, potential risk or discomforts. You need to tell them. If somebody else is going to be touching their document or using their information or data, you need to let them know. We need to let them know. And the next one, which is number five, is the client's right to refuse or withdraw. You must tell them they have right to refuse this test or to withdraw at a point when they are not comfortable moving forward. And the last one, limits of confidentiality. Limits of confidentiality. That is the risk of harm, legal mandates. Before, as a registered psychotherapist, before I begin to, meet my client, all these things must be done. I have to do it. I have to let them know why we are here. If I'm recommending any tools to any of my clients, I have to let them know why they have to use it or why they are using it, why I'm recommending, the purpose, and what the role that tools will be playing in their recovery. We need to let them know. Coming down to pastoral contexts, power dynamics are often intensified, as you know. Parishioners may feel unable to refuse a test requested by a minister or church authority. Ethical practice requires extra care to ensure voluntariness. This is very, very important. People respect the church leadership, people respect the church authority. We must not take advantage of people. As a result, they respect their calls to the church, and impose things on them. We should let them know that if they're not comfortable, they can refuse any test, they can refuse anything. If we want to support them, they must be well carried along. We must not use our position to take advantage of the people. Another textbook, part of our textbook for this, course, Gregory, emphasizes that consent is not a one-time form, but an ongoing ethical dialogue. If you read chapter 1b, which is prescribed for this week of the psychological testing textbook that we have on our portal, that talks about the history, principles, and application. When you read chapter 1b, it talks about that. It means it's not just at the beginning of whatever you are doing that you need to administer informed consent. It must be ongoing dialogue. You keep talking about some of the components of informed consent that we have talked about the other time. Please note that. Let's go to the next subtopic: confidentiality and test data protection. Confidentiality and test data protection. What is confidentiality? When we are talking about confidentiality, we reverse to the ethical and legal obligation to protect test data, result, and interpretation from unauthorized disclosure. I want to say that again. Confidentiality refers to the ethical and legal obligation to protect test data, test results, and interpretation from unauthorized or result or interpretation. We are talking about the raw test data. You are carrying out a test and you are generating a result. You are doing. It must not be accessible by all and sundry. We are talking about test scores and reports. We are talking about the clinical interpretation you gave to the test. You just done. You just did. We're talking about electronics and paper records of the test you have carried out. You're not just flinging them around the places. You are protecting all this information, the data, the results, the interview. You are protecting them so that unauthorized personnel will not have access to it. What are the limits of confidentiality? Confidentiality may be ethical or legal breached. Okay? Can be ethical or legally breached when there is imminent risk of harm to self or others. When there is suspected abuse of a child, elders, or vulnerable person. And three, records are lawfully subpoenaed. When we're talking about something subpoena, we are mean that a judge in the court is requesting for a particular data. Some of you don't know that a judge can request for the result, the data, scores, and all those things of whatever you're working on. They can ask for it. They can ask for it. Okay, so when whatever you are disclosing to anybody, you must carry the client along 24/7. Nothing must be done behind the client. Okay, so when there's an imminent risk of harm, when you suspect abuse of a child, elders, and vulnerable, and when records are lawfully subpoenaed, at that point, limit of confidentiality has been ethically and legally breached. In church or pastoral settings, confidentiality must be clearly distinguished from informal sharing, prayer request, church administrative reporting. Let me give you an example. I have seen a situation whereby a church leader, a pastor, climbed the pulpit and he wanted to make an illustration to buttress his sermon. And he began to disclose something about the client. You know, we have to be very, very careful of information we are sharing. You don't just turn people's issue to prayer request without their consent. Even if they are asking you to pray for them, they are not asking you to take it to the church service. Or during the church administrative meeting, you are reporting and you mistakenly talking about the informations of people. You don't do that. So failure to maintain confidentiality can lead to legal liability. ethical violation, and loss of trust. I want to say that again. Failure to maintain confidentiality can lead to legal liability, ethical violation, and loss of trust. You can be sued. You can be sued. And when you are sued, you know what that means. It means that you will lose that position. You will lose that privilege you have. And you can be asked to pay fine. All right. So there are a lot of you have ruined your career. You've ruined so many things. So this is very, very important. When we're talking about all these things, it's for your sake, it's for your protection. Okay? I don't know how much it takes to hire a lawyer now. If you have any legal battle, you have to hire a lawyer. It's not a small money. And at the end of the day, if you are guilty, then you are in a soup. You have to pay for damages. So we have to be very, very careful. It's not a work you do where you are not organized. You must be organized. You must be a settled person. Otherwise, the information of people, you know, can be everywhere. Let's look at the next subtopic: misuse and abuse of psychological tests. What are the common forms of test misuse? Misuse of tests occurs when tests are administered without proper training or competence. That's number one, abuse. That's why we do a lot of practicum. Okay, lecture class is not enough to practice. We need practicum. We need a lot of, in fact, in this part of the world, you have to present a lot of hours of training before you can be allowed to register. All right? A lot of hours. So tests are administered without proper training or competency. That's a misuse of tests. Another one is that tests are used when inappropriate population, cultural, linguistic, developmental mismatch. That's when that happens, you misuse a test. Inappropriate population. Misuse of tests occurs when results are over-interpreted or taken out of context. When you take the result out of context or you over-interpreted the results, that's abuse of tests, misuse of tests. Misuse of tests occurs when tests are used for purposes they were not designed for. All right? You got a data about someone meant for one thing and you're using it for another thing. For example, diagnosis, employment screening, spiritual judgment, and all. Whatever a test result is collected for, please use it for it. Don't divert the test to something else. Misuse of tests occur when test results are treated as label rather than hypothesis. Okay, you just conducted a test on someone and you want to describe to your colleagues who is the owner of that, and you are using, what you have seen, in the result, you are using that to label the client. You know, it's not to label anybody. It's an hypothesis. When you read the Cohen textbook, they are in one of our book, Cohen, pages 55 to 69, 55 to 69. That page warns that test scores are tools for decision making, not infallible truths. So ethical assessors avoid reification. There's something we call reification. Treating scores as if they were the person. That is reification. So you will have to avoid reification. 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 Treating scores as if they were the person. So it's just the scores are just tools for decision making, not infallible truths. So we must avoid reification, treating scores as if they were the persons. Pastoral danger. In ministry context, misuse may lead to spiritual harm. That's number one. Can also lead to stigma. You are stigmatizing, the person. Stigmatization. It can also lead to misguided counseling or discipline. Misguided counseling and discipline. Number four, it can lead to confusion between psychological assessment and spiritual discernment. Can you see now that there are a lot of harms around misuse of test score? So when it comes to legal issues in psychological testing, I want you to know that psychological testing is regulated by law in many jurisdictions. Okay? They are regulated. So key legal considerations include scope of practice, that is, only qualified professionals may administer and interpret certain tests. Number two, duty of care. Those who are carrying out tests are legally responsible for foreseeable harm. Number three, record keeping and data protection. It's a serious matter. It's a serious issue. Informed consent documentation. That informed consent form must be documented. References can be made to them in the future. You must not be looking for it. And of course, test security and copyright protection. These are legal issues that are very important we need to pay attention to in psychological testing. So, legal accountability applies equally in clinical settings, in educational institutions, in church-based counseling program. Ignorance of the law, does not excuse unethical or illegal practice. We are rounding off. Let's look into professional ethical guidelines. Professional bodies provide formal ethical standards. That's why in this part of the world, you can't just do anything. There are professional bodies and colleges that takes care that take care of all these things we're talking about. Okay, that's why we have American Psychological Association (APA) ethical principles. We have Canadian Psychological Association (CPA) code of ethics. We have licensing board regulations. Those are professional bodies, that provide formal ethical standards. And this guideline addresses the guideline address competence, dual relationships, assessment integrity, test security, professional accountability. So that's why when you are registering with the college or your professional body, all this information will be handed over to you. Gregory underscores that ethical testing require continuous professional development, not merely initial training. Not that you just finish school and you go to bed. Every year, there are a number of hours you have to provide every year of training. You have to continue to train and retrain and retrain and retrain and retrain. You don't go to bed after finishing your course. You continue to do further studies. When it comes to pastoral and ministerial ethical guidelines, in pastoral counseling, ethical responsibility is dual. Professional psychological standards, pastoral, theological, and ecclesial accountability. So it's dual. You are dealing with professional and you are dealing with pastoral, not just one. But in the secular world, well, you are dealing with professional bodies alone. You are dealing with psychological standards alone. But when it comes to church context, you are dealing with the two. Okay, so pastoral ethical commitments include respect for the imago Dei in every person. Image of God, imago Dei, image of God in every person. Number two, pastoral ethical commitments include avoidance of coercion and spiritual manipulation. We need to avoid that. It also includes clear boundaries between pastoral care and clinical assessment. We must set healthy boundary. And the last one there is referral when issues exceed pastoral competence. You have been dealing with the same issue and you notice that this is beyond what you can take care of in the church, you can deal with. You need to refer to people who can help, who can help. Ethical pastoral assessment seeks healing, restoration, and wisdom, not control or diagnose for its own sake. So by the time we finish whatever we are doing, if you want to be a psychometrist or you want to whatever you want to be doing, you still have to go through the college. You still have to register. You must be registered so that before you can practice. So that you know you have to know some of the things we need to know. Let's look at integrative ethical discernment. Ethical psychological testing requires technical competence, legal compliance, moral sensitivity, and pastoral humility. Because a good assessment is not only accurate, it is wise, just, and compassionate. So these are few things we need to understand when it comes to psychological testing, and when we're dealing with history, principle, and application of psychological testing, which we need to take note of. And I hope by the time you read your textbook and the chapter portion to this week, according to Quine and Gregory, you'll be able to match the two together and understand better what we are talking about. So, this in summary, whatever we are doing, we have to preserve our head as you preserve the head of your client. You can be in danger with whatever you are doing. You must not run into trouble. You have to do whatever you want to do with carefulness because it can lead to a lot of problem. It's a legal matter. It's a legal issue, and taking notice of that, that will be able to protect ourselves and be fine with whatever we are doing. So that's it for this week. I hope you will listen to this over and over. There are a lot of information inside these lectures. I hope you will find time to listen to all of them together and pick some important point from there. Until I come your way next week in our week 4, I hope you enjoy this week and welcome to the month of February. Take care, everyone.